Hi, this is Mark from LongIslandWatch.com, and welcome to the first Watch and Learn of 2017. I do plan to keep the series going through the entire year. Thank you for joining in. Today, I'm going to start off the year with something simple, how to wind and set an automatic or mechanical watch, even a quartz watch. Just obviously all the winding stuff won't apply. But this is really born out of I guess basic questions that we get all the time. I did cover some of it in the first Watch and Learn I did, but I really didn't know where the series was going at that point, so I probably skipped a lot of stuff. We're going to shoot this one and focus entirely on like square one, Watches 101, how to set the time, time, day, and date, and how to wind it if it's a mechanical, how to wind it if it's an automatic, and then of course, being watch and learn, I want to go one step further, and I want to show you how watches wind, why automatics don't overwind, all that good stuff that, all that nice engineering that's inside the watch that is really cool. We get a lot of questions asking, what's the best way to wind a watch? I've read some hysterical posts over the internet on people that, they take a conglomerate of a bunch of responses that they've gotten on various forums on the best way to wind your watch or set your watch, and there's so much contradictory stuff. So I wanted to give my 2 cents into that pile. I hope most of it's correct. It's things that I've done for my entire, not only watch collecting hobby, which is, I don't know, about 30 years, 25 years, but then through my career as selling watches for, well over a decade now. I want to share how I like to treat watches and how I approach the winding and setting and the best practices and how I wind my watches. So I've got a bunch of watches on the table that I think will help really tell this story. I've got mechanicals, I've got automatics, I've got skeletons. I've got skeletons that are automatics and mechanicals, and another watch that I'm going to take the back off of, and we can see how things work on the inside. So let's get into it. Oh, I forgot to do a wristwatch check. I'm sorry. Forgive me. So G-Shock, solar, atomic, negative display. Took me a while to get used to the negative display, but I'm used to it by now. But everybody needs a G-Shock, right? And then I've got a Junkers pilot's watch with that, cockpit style dial. Okay, now we can get started. So let's discuss how to wind and set an automatic or mechanical watch. The first thing you have to figure out, if you're gifted a watch, if you're new to the hobby, you need to figure out what kind of watch you have. Mechanicals come in more or less two types. You can have an automatic, which is a self-winding, or you can have a mechanical, which is like the old hand crankers from yesteryear. And in front of you, I have a couple of examples. I have 3 autos and 1 mechanical, and I'm bringing out a couple of skeletons just because we can really see into them, and I can more explain the way things work. So the first thing you're going to have to figure out when you get your watch is, before you figure out if it's automatic or mechanical, you need to figure out how to pull the crown out. So your crown can either be a push-pull, which means you pull it out and you push it in, or it could be screw-down. So the swatch I have here is a simple push-pull. You put your fingernail under the crown and you yank it out. It comes out. You can see it's out. I can move the hands, or I could push it in, and then I'm in winding mode. If you get a watch and it's 200 meters water resistant or more, there's a very good chance it is a screw down crown. So you can tug, pull all you want. You will not pull the crown out. It is screwed down. To unscrew it, it's just the way it sounds. You turn it counterclockwise. See, I'm turning it, and it's separating from the case. And I'm going to get out to a certain point, and it's going to pop. It just popped. You can see my finger behind it, and you can see the crown tube that it was threaded onto. And now, at this point, you can pull the crown out 1 click, 2 clicks, and you can change the time. So again, the first thing you need to figure out is if it's screwed down or not. So let's say you've got your watch and now you know what kind of crown you have. So now you want to set it. So this is, here's an automatic with a day and a date. So this is probably as complicated as it's going to get. So the first thing you're going to want to do is set the time. Before you set it, you need to give it a little bit of a wind. So it's running. This one just happened to start running because this is an automatic. It's a self-winder. It's got a little weight in the back, and I'll pull off the back in a few minutes, and you can see into it. But you want to get it started, so you give it some gentle shakes side to side. This is a watch that no matter how much I turn the crown when it's in the home position, I've already popped it out, I am not winding it. I'm doing nothing. Many Orients are like this. Many Seikos are like this. They do not have what they call hand winding. So when I turn the crown, I'm not winding the watch. The only way this gets wound is by wearing it. When you wear it or when you move it around, you're moving a rotor. The rotor's in the back. There's the rotor. This little thing here. And as you move it back and forth, you're winding the watch. Again, I know I have gloves on and everything, and there's a lint. Don't worry. This is one of those junk pieces I talk about. Actually, an hour ago, this thing was not working. It was in a bin, and I was shaking it to death, and it wasn't running. And it figures I start the video, and I pick it up, and it starts moving. But anyway, this is an old Orient Mako XL that's I use for parts. But you need to wind it or shake it. So you're going to shake it. You're going to get it going. And once you get it going, you're going to pull the crown out to 2 clicks. And you're going to start advancing the time forwards. Now, this will all apply whether your watch is an automatic or even a quartz battery-driven watch, or an Eco Drive, or a Seiko Solar, or a Kinetic. It doesn't matter. All these directions really apply to anything. So I'm sorry, I was just talking. So you can just keep advancing the time forwards, and what you're waiting for is a day and date flip. You can see the date's going to flip. It just flipped to 12, and now the day is going to flip twice as well. It's going to go from Saturday to Sábado, which is Saturday in Spanish, and it's going to flip back around 3 a.m. to Sunday. So now I know the watch is set to 4 o'clock a.m. So whatever time it is now, let's say it's 11. I'm going to set it to 11, and I'm going to stop there. I'm going to push the crown all the way back in, and then I'm going to pull it out 1 click. I'm going to set the date. See, turning it one way does nothing. Turning it the other way sets the date, and then I would set the day, and the day is, on these Orients, the day is set by the secondary button. English or Spanish, you pick it. On some Seikos, you just spin the crown the other way, and the day moves. It doesn't matter how it's set, but that's it. Once you have it, you push the crown in, and then in this instance, you turn it and spin it. And it's going to push down and turn, and you're going to seat the crown. Now you can see the crown is seated against the case again. Water resistance is maintained. So I have just wound this watch. I've set it. I have not wound it yet. It's got a little bit of a power reserve to it. So people ask, what is the best way to wind a watch? Well, it really depends. It's really whatever you want to do. So this is an automatic, so you can't wind it unless you wear it. So what would I do at this point? I've just woken up in the morning, and I've set the time and the date. And now I'm going to put it, because it wasn't on a winder, let's say, I would just put it on and start my day and not worry about it, because I'm active enough where it's going to continually wind throughout the day, and by nighttime, it'll probably build up its full 40 hours of power reserve. But let's say you're not that active. Well, since you can't wind it by hand, you're going to want to just jostle it back and forth for 30 seconds or a minute to give it enough reserve to get it going for, maybe an hour or so. That way, in that hour, you'll start moving around a bit. Maybe you take some time to get going in the morning as well. And then it'll build up enough of a reserve that it'll run the rest of the day while it's on your wrist. And hopefully build up some extra reserve that it can run the entire night. The big problem with automatics is that if you are not active, they will not wind. So if you cannot wind them with the crown, you need to have a level of activity to keep them wound. For most people, it's not an issue, but if you're sedentary, it can be an issue. I know it was an issue with people that I know, where they simply did not move around enough during the day, and the watch did not take a wind. So I'm going to switch gears for a second. I want to pull up this Zeppelin. This is a push-pull crown with the date, but this watch has added this nice power reserve complication. So you see this needle here, this goldish needle. It sweeps from 0 all the way up to 45-ish or 40. This is a Miyota movement. This is a push-pull crown. No screw down. So on the Graf Zeppelin, first thing I'm going to do is advance the time. But I actually don't have to, because I can see down here I have a 24-hour hand, so I know I'm in AM. But still, I'm going to advance the time, and I'm going to go past through noon, and I'm just going to keep going. I want to go until that date flips. That way I know, obviously I can tell by 24-hour hand, but I want to show you guys the date flips, and now we can set it to whatever time. I'm not going to go all the way. Let's just say it's 5 a.m. right now. And today is the 4th, so we're all set. We push the crown back in. Okay, it started running, but this has a hand winding capability. And I'm going to put it up next to the microphone. Can you hear that? that is the watch winding. As I wind it, you see that power reserve needle starts going up. Now it's going to go up all the way to 40 or 45. And I'm just going to keep winding it. Now you'll see when I get up to the top, I'm going to keep winding it. It's at 45. I can still wind it. Still winding it. Needle's not moving. No springs are snapping. So what's going on? Well, as you could probably guess, there's a little internal mechanism that prevents you from overwinding the watch. And I will get into that in a minute. I want to bring up another watch so you can really see what's happening. Here is a Rouge Wasp skeleton watch. And I want you to look. I'm going to wind it. It's just running just from my hand motion. It's not an automatic. This is a mechanical hand wind. I want you to look down here. This is the mainspring barrel. And if you look carefully, you'll see the spring starts at the center, comes out, loops around, and then the entire spring is compressed against the outside of the barrel. If I flip it over, you see it again. It's at the bottom here. So as I start winding it, you see it spinning counterclockwise, and that middle section is moving, and the spring is coming into the center. More and more. It's coming away from the outside, and it's becoming what they call sprung. And it's building up all this energy. And it wants to unwind, and it's unwinding. And the unwinding is obviously driving the escapement. You could look at that in the other video that we did on the difference between automatic and quartz watches. But you'll wind it all the way, and you'll get to a point where the spring is now all on the inside, and nothing is on the outside. And now, I can't wind it anymore. This, on a mechanical watch, a non-automatic, this is when you must stop. You do not force it past the point where you feel resistance, because the next thing that'll happen is you'll snap the stem inside the watch. The stem is a tiny, tiny piece of steel that engages the various cams inside and spins things around. And you do not want to force that because you will snap it. You're going to wind it a little bit, set your day and date, and then you're going to wind it all the way to complete. And you'll rewind it maybe later in the day at night, and then the next morning you wind it a couple of times a day. Now, why do you wind watches a couple of times a day? Well, this is pretty important because watches suffer from something called isochronism, which you may have heard, like with a pendulum, no matter how long a pendulum is, no matter how heavy the weight on the end of a pendulum is, all pendulums will oscillate with the same frequency back and forth on Earth. The only thing that drives the frequency of a pendulum or how fast it goes back and forth is going to be the length of the string it's on or the length of the rod it's on. Watches are not much different. It wants to keep beating, but the amount of spring force that is kept in the barrel is now pushing against these parts, making them oscillate. And the watches are tuned to run. They're most accurate when there's the most tension in the spring. As it unwinds and has less and less spring force, the watches do become more and more inaccurate. So they are meant to run with a full power reserve. You want to keep that power full. You want to wind it once or twice a day. It's not the end of the world if it gets near the end of its wind. It's not going to, go crazy, but it will drift. Watches are, timed against this. More expensive ones do have torque control mechanisms to help the spring unwind in a more reasonable, consistent energy pattern. Most of the affordable watches are just based on, they're based on movements that were designed in the 70s and 80s. And, materials are getting better and stuff, but still, the spring certainly has different levels of torque as it goes through its various winding states. So you want to keep it wound, which is where the automatic comes in extremely handy. So this is my Swatch irony, body and soul irony, I believe it's called. And so now this is an automatic. This is dead as a doornail right now. I've let it sit for a few days. And you could see, I'm going to do it again. See the spring is all the way pushed against the outside of the barrel? Now what I like about this one is that it shows you something. I love this watch. So I'm going to wind it up. See how it starts right up? This thing hasn't been serviced. It's a non-serviceable watch. It's, I don't know, it's got to be at least 20 years old. So I'm going to spin it. And so now again, the spring is going to go all the way towards the center of the watch. The center of the barrel. It's going to keep winding up. So I'm just going to get it there. I'll be back in a minute. Okay. So now it's fully wound. And I remember before on the Rouge, I tried to wind it more on this black one. I tried to wind it, but it was stuck, and I wouldn't dare go any further. I don't want to snap anything. But yet I showed you before on the Zeppelin, I could wind it to my heart's content, and nothing will happen. Well, a lot of people say on automatics, well, there's a clutch mechanism built in, and there is, in the sense that there's a decoupling, but it's not a mechanical clutch. It's quite ingenious. So if you look, I tried to stop the watch from winding right at the right spot. The edge of the mainspring is right there, right at the outside of the barrel. So the whole thing is wound around, and then the outside is stuck to the inner portion of the barrel. And I'm going to wind it some more. Now watch what happens as I wind. Watch that outside of the barrel. Do you see the barrel? Whole barrel just spun? The whole spring spins. Watch, it's still spinning. There it goes. What's happening is that instead of the spring winding more, it just won't wind anymore. It's just slipping inside the mainspring barrel. It is meant to slip. So like a clutch slips, I guess, in a car. But this is just, there's like a little detent or something in the side of the mainspring barrel, and the edge of the spring fits in there. And as you keep winding, it gets a little more tension on it than it can hold, and it just slips. So it doesn't become fully unsprung and the thing goes crazy and all the spring force releases. It just releases a little bit of its tension, and it spins around a bit. So while I was filming this, while I was preparing to film this, I was like, well, why don't they just make watches like mechanicals? Why don't they just do that, with the mechanical hand winders? I don't have an answer. My best guess is that because one thing that can happen is if this starts to slip prematurely, you lose power reserve. So instead of the watch getting 40 hours, maybe you'll get 20 hours. With the mechanical hand wind, you obviously can't wind it, and you can only wind it with the crown. You want it to always have a full wind. So they fix both ends of the spring. And this, again, only the center is fixed and the outside more or less floats. I thought that was important. So you keep winding, you keep wearing this watch, it's going to continually wind, and that barrel is going to continually spin. So what's happening inside to keep it constantly spinning like that? What makes an automatic an automatic? Well, obviously mechanical hand winders came out way before automatics. But what made automatics possible is this right here, this rotor, and what they call the winding bridge, this self-winding bridge. This attachment, which is held on with a few screws, consists of a couple of gears, and you can hear it. I'm going to put it up next to the microphone in a minute if you can't hear it. It's actually winding the spring. So let's find the mainspring barrel. Unfortunately, this is not a skeleton watch, so we're going to do our best. But here is the mainspring barrel, this part right here, my pen is on, and right there, that's like a pawl and ratchet. So as it winds, the gear is going to move, and this pawl and ratchet is going to slip into position and prevent the mainspring from backing up. I want you to keep your eye on this piece of metal and this gear here. Not this gear. This is the gear that engages the movement to power the watch. This is what winds the mainspring. And this is the little ratchet that prevents it from backing up. So I'm going to move the rotor back and forth. Here we go. And do you see? See it's moving clockwise? It's clicking. I don't know if you can hear it clicking. I'm going to move it next to the microphone for a second. So just bear with me. So I think you could hear that. But now I want to give you a feel for what's going on. So if you remember when we wound the watch, it takes a decent amount of torque with our fingers to wind the spring. But this is effortless. I'm just using my finger just so I can move it. But there's nothing going on here. It obviously goes by its own weight. So what's happening? Well, there's a tremendous mechanical advantage built into this. And there's a lot of gears to gear it down, and it moves that spring barrel. So as you can imagine, if they didn't have that little slipping mechanism built in, after, I don't know, a couple hours of wearing your watch, you would just snap the spring because it would keep wanting to wind. So that little slip mechanism is obviously very important because this little motion I'm doing now could cause the spring to just explode. So the last thing I wanted to talk about, and I'm just do it very briefly, it's probably another video topic, is service. People always ask me about service, and there's a I want to say, I probably used to say unwritten, but it seems to me now it's a written rule that around every 5 years an automatic needs servicing. So I own many automatics. I've been collecting watches for probably close to 25, 30 years. How many automatics have I serviced? I've serviced one. I own a lot. I know people say I'm crazy. What are you doing? But I just come from the school that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If your watch is not performing strangely, there's no need to service it. If your watch needs service, in my opinion, I'm not a watchmaker. I've told you that many times. If it's running slow, if it's running fast, inaccurate, it stops. These are signs, obviously, that it's going to need servicing. But if it's running fine, why do it? I can't think of anything more strange than taking something like this and opening it up, and this is non-serviceable, but still, and taking out all those little parts, all those little gears, all those little screws, and putting them in a bucket, cleaning everything, and putting it back together. I just can't see it going back together and working exactly the same as it did when it was first assembled. Obviously, it does. Watchmakers are extremely proficient and they are very good at what they do. But just from an economical point of view, or just my engineering sense, I guess, is if it doesn't need it, why do it? So that is the school that I come from. I have met watchmakers on both sides of the fence. I have read numerous posts where people show, after 10 years, even though the watch was still running perfect, you can see the gears are worn down. And I guess maybe the evidence is there. I just turned a blind eye to it. Like I said, as long as my watch still keeps good time, I am happy as a clam at high tide. So this has been Mark from LongIslandWatch.com with the first Watch and Learn of 2017. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked this video, please like it. If you have not subscribed to our channel, please do so at this time. If you have any questions or comments or want to weigh in with your own thoughts, I really do appreciate reading everything. Sound off down below, and I'll be sure to address it as soon as I can. Thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.